that slide on the wall? Yes, that'd be fine.
Is there anything else on the other slides? Are you going to leave the budget?
I have a narrative written. I may call on you though.
Okay,
If I get a question I can't answer.
Easy, that's what they're going to say.
This is fine. After our motion, remember, we'll do a discussion.
Yeah.
Everything
The
else
slides are in the wrong order, but
it'll work, yeah.
let no officer of the church get between members and their coffee. I call this special meeting of the congregation to order. Good morning. Thank you for attending this meeting. My name is Jeff Gauger, and it's my privilege to serve as your congregational president this year. Today's meeting is your opportunity to share in the ministry and governance of your church. We will present the 2023 financial report. We'll also seek your approval of the 2024 operating budget. Significantly, because of the timing of the Reverend Nathan Ryan sabbatical last year, the draft 2024 budget we'll ask you to vote on today was developed with more hands-on work from lay members of the church than ever in the past. I want especially to thank Rob Johnson, the church treasurer, who with Allison Hall conducted a line-by-line review of every expense account to ensure that this document captures anticipated expenses as accurately as possible. Members of the Finance Committee also participated in drafting the budget, as did Vice President Adam Voss. And thank you to the stewardship team whose work last fall in shepherding the pledge drive made this budget possible. Thank you to Reverend Nathan, who did much of the difficult discernment needed to fit his and the congregation's dreams for UCBR into our current income realities. And to the board, whose 7 members spent considerable time reviewing and discussing the budget before endorsing it for your review, and we hope your approval. I wish to acknowledge the board members now. Vice President Adam Voss, I know you're here, Adam, would you stand? Secretary Mariah Mengelson-Clark, and members Jerry Becknell, Jackie Blaney, Debbie Duckworth, and past President Heather Yonke. All of these labors are the work of ministry in a faith community, although not the sexy and fun part necessarily. For the sexy and fun part, join the choir. I thank all who participated in drafting this budget, and I thank you for being here today to fulfill the congregation's role in stewarding UCBR's financial resources. Here's our agenda today. And now I'll ask Treasurer Rob Johnson to present on our 2023 finances.
Thank you, Jeff. Again, my name is Rob Johnson. I'm the treasurer of the church, and I wanted to talk a moment about the 2023 financial results. As you can see on the screen, the pledges for 2023 slightly exceeded the budget, which was welcomed, and it was very important because last year was a very difficult year for the church from an expense perspective. We also were able to generate significantly more other income than we budgeted, but one of the aspects of that relates to the security grant that the church received to improve the security for the entranceways and the doors. We received a $35,000 grant that's included in the other income. Of course, we spent that money exactly, and you can see that in the expenses for the grant expense. The net income for the year was negative $13,000, which was a little disappointing, but it really related to the significant expenses we incurred related to the building and grounds and the office administration. Simply due to inflation, the energy costs were significantly higher than we budgeted, and some of the facility repairs that went on, air conditioners and some other things. So from my perspective, with the significant expenses we had last year, being able to just have a deficit of $13,000 was really fairly good from an overall perspective. This year, we believe we've budgeted more for the building and grounds and the office administration based on our actual costs from last year. So I feel better about that. We also have some reserve funds set aside. They're not as large as they used to be, but we do have some reserve funds that could help with unplanned expenses, such as the air conditioners or something of that nature. I think otherwise, you can see depicted here, some of the costs were a little over budget and some were a little under budget, but overall, I think the primary deficit was driven by the additional expenses for the building and grounds. Are there any questions that I can answer about the 2023 results? Okay.
Then we can hold questions until we have a discussion.
Sure.
On the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Yep.
Thank you, Rob. So I'll turn to my colleagues on the board who have tallied how many members are present. Do we have a quorum? Thank you, Heather. So now I'd like to read to you special rules of order that I'd like your approval to use for this meeting. This is about the parliamentary side of things. So, in the interest of using your time efficiently, providing for clear and orderly communication, aiding the board secretary in capturing spoken information, and providing an opportunity for all members who wish to be heard during discussion, the following procedures shall be observed to conduct the business of this congregational meeting. Number one, the president of the board serves as the chair of the congregational meeting and will recognize members to speak. David Hawley will serve as parliamentarian. Members making comments are asked to make comments succinct and to address the chair, who will recognize persons to whom questions are directed for their response. Members will be limited to 2 minutes each time they speak. 3, when addressing the congregation, members shall identify themselves so that they can be identified in the minutes. Please wait for confirmation that your name has been recorded. 4, no member, other than a board member or someone identified to give a report or to answer a question, speaks a second time if another member is waiting to speak for a first time. 5, if discussion occurs concerning any reports or motions on the agenda, discussion shall be limited to an initial period of 20 minutes. If members have additional comments at the end of that time, successive 10-minute time periods may be proposed for continuing discussion. At any point in time during these periods of discussion, if no further discussion is needed, the chair will note that discussion has ended and call for a vote to end discussion, which, if approved by majority vote, will be followed by a vote on the motion under consideration. Number 6, In lieu of calling for a motion and second for voting and a discussion, a sufficient amount of time will be waited upon until it appears discussion is complete. Then a vote will be called. Likewise, the meeting may be adjourned by the president once all business is conducted without a motion to do so. The bylaws require a simple majority approval for motions on the agenda. All active members may vote. Proxies are not accepted for this meeting. And 8, voting will be by raised hand, and those votes previously received via email will be included in the vote. May I have a motion that congregants agree to observe the special rules of order? Penny Ramsdale. Thank you, Penny. A second? Did you get that, Heather? All in favor, could you signify by raising your hand? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. It looked unanimous to me. Yes, there were no opposed. So I'd like to make a short presentation about highlights in the budget. There are copies of the budget in the back of the room if you'd like more detail than I'm going to offer from the pulpit. So the budget is our main and only order of business today. The board has recommended it for your approval. I'll show portions of it on the screen, but not the whole thing, so the printed budget could be helpful to you if you want more detail. As you've seen from the treasurer's presentation, our pledge income exceeded expectations in 2023 by a little, while expenses exceeded budget by more than a little. Our 2023 expense performance and pledge pattern significantly shaped the drafting of the 2024 budget. I'll address the budget in 4 steps, as shown here: the big picture, income and detail, major expense increases, and major expense reductions. Here is the budget pattern for the past 2 years and the proposed 2024 budget. As you can see, the 2024 proposal forecasts both income and expenses that exceed 2023, but are below those figures for 2022. This is the income portion of the budget of the proposed budget, shown in detail. If you look to the bottom right corner of the spreadsheet, you'll see that the budget forecasts total income of $653,000. Just a note, the budgeted expenses are the same amount. That's up from 2023, but the composition of the income differs significantly from last year. By far, our biggest source of income is pledges. And on the top line, you'll see that pledge income has been reduced from last year by $34,000. Pledged dollars were down for 2024, reflecting 2 notable changes in pledging patterns. The first is that many pledging members increased their pledges by larger amounts than we've seen in the past. Thank you. At the same time, we received fewer pledges, 40 fewer pledges than we did last year. The result was the amount you see on the top line here, $501,000. To partially offset the increase in pledged income, this budget includes a sizable increase in fundraising, which you can see here under other income. from $35,000 to $75,000. I'll let that sink in. The increase prompted much discussion and discernment and has been included only after consultation with and support from the Generosity fundraising team. I want to address fundraising in some detail because it represents a departure from past patterns. The screen shows more detail about the planned fundraising. We anticipate that two major events will raise about half of the budgeted $75,000. That will be the auction in May and a new event in October. The fundraising team has a clear idea about what that October event can be. I won't risk mischaracterizing or misdescribing it by trying to explain it to you myself. The event will, if successful, draw attendees from the broader community, meaning not just from us. Then, 4 new and smaller fundraising events will focus on these 4 areas shown there: worship and arts, faith formation and programming, building and technology, justice and outreach. These events are intended to permit members, that is us, to match any additional giving to their UCBR passion points. Again, the fundraising team already has specific ideas in mind for each event, at least one of which, based on my understanding, will attract participation from the broader community. Rob has already described the expense impact from last year. I wanted to highlight significant increases in the expense budget here. Inflation is our current reality, and the proposed budget must acknowledge as much. These are the major budgeted expense increases. They reflect our actual expense run rates from last year, or in the case of staff raises, our obligation to do as much as our resources will allow to reward them for good performance and to permit them to pay their own bills. These are major expense reductions in the proposed 2024 budget. There are 3. The reduction in dues to the Unitarian Universalist Association is disappointing. UCBR, until the pandemic, was a fair share congregation and paid about $30,000 a year in dues. It was an unavoidable reduction to maintain programming. The other expense reductions resulted from 1, for telephone and internet, a change in vendor, and 2, for bookkeeping, a shift from a part-time employee to an outside vendor. Many thanks to Allison Hall for finding and shepherding these new arrangements. So before we turn to requesting a motion to adopt this budget and then discussion, I'll share 2 more thoughts. Significantly, and I think this is important, this budget, for only the 2nd consecutive year in recent memory, is entirely self-sufficient. Until last year, UCBR operating budgets were supplemented by, number 1, drawing from the reserve accumulated in the Great Expectations fundraising drive, and/or, number 2, relying on pandemic-era loans from the federal government that were later forgiven. The Great Expectations Fund is gone, and alas, the government is no longer giving pandemic loans. And, this is point number 2, on a more positive note, membership is growing. It really is. After a lapse caused by our ministerial transition and then the pandemic. And because this budget realistically captures our fixed costs, each new member pledge will increase our financial headroom for things that are more fun and more spiritually fulfilling than paying our basic bills. We all, each of us, can help in this area by practicing radical hospitality with visitors, each of whom is a prospective member and thus a prospective pledger. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the 2023 operating budget. When we have a motion and a second, then we can turn to discussion before a vote. Right, David? Ross Yankee moved. Is there a second? The floor is yours. And if you have a wish to speak and or have a question, could you come to this microphone here and please state your name?
Morning, it's Allie Crawford.
Mike, is that?
Is it okay? Okay. So my question is, with the your plan to make up for the deficit with the auction, what is that? What are those anticipated amounts of money that you're going to raise from the auction? Do those come from like prior success with auctions, or how did you come up with that amount per auction that you're anticipating raising? Where does that makeup come from?
Well, in the case of the auction, it's partly past experience. Our auction last May raised nearly $30,000. What's your name?
Allie Crawford.
Did you get it, Heather? There's some good faith by guess and by golly on the other events.
David Lindenfeld. I just wondered if we could hear maybe from the generosity team some of their thoughts they had about the other fundraising events. We just saw the headings there, and there wasn't really enough information to kind of chew on. I think the earlier we can start thinking about those, the better. So I was wondering if somebody could speak to that.
Nathan?
So remember, we have the generosity team is not just over fundraising. It's over, there's leaders who do stewardship, leaders who do education and culture, and there's another one that I'm forgetting. But planned giving, legacy giving, there's all kinds of stuff generosity team is doing. Penny, are you good with me talking, or do you want to? Okay. So the generosity team has identified 4 key areas to fundraise within. It's a little risky because whenever you ask people to give for the things they like, although we love air conditioners, rarely people give for the air conditioners in the winter. You need the air conditioners as well. So the fundraising ideas, and one is an eat-in meal where you pay for a plate. And we're going to have cultural shifts with this. We haven't discussed this entirely, but an idea would be one plate is $1, one plate is $5, and one is $100, but they're all the same plate. Clever ways so that everyone has access to the fundraiser, but it doesn't just become a reward for those who have wealth. So one would be an eat-in fundraiser. One would be, we're not calling it a go-away fundraiser, but like a meal, like a jambalaya box or something that you could have people from their work come and buy or take home. One of them is a tagging on with the Magic Makers Market, what is it? Magical Spring Market, and I'm not exactly sure what that'll look like yet, but basically having vendors and sales is a way that we do it. The other is a really confusing one, but it's really cool. We're going to have you buy plain birdhouses that, not for like a large markup, but just enough to fundraise a little. Have you decorate those as artistically as possible, bring them back to the church, and then auction those off. So So between those, we're presuming we can fill it, and there may be some other ways to fill the gap. This is an absurd amount of money to ask the fundraising team to take on, but it's that or we're out of money to cut, really. So it's that or we cut insurance or staff or something like that. So people give in different ways. Some people pledging just doesn't work for them, but selling things or doing things does. So this is just a different attempt to get at a different angle of giving. And should I? The October event, the idea is that it would be a big concert or a thing that would gather people in from all over the community. But the people who are organizing that don't have their act together enough yet for me to declare it. Does that make sense? The other thing you should know that the generosity team is doing, most churches our size, 70% of their budget comes from pledges, and the other 30% comes from other income sources. Our church, 90% comes from pledges. So we're missing basically $200,000 in this budget that we could do whatever we want with. If we had an endowment that gave, that was a $2 or $3 million endowment, we would have all the money we would know what to do with, would be great. So there's actually a generosity team, sub-team is working on building an endowment and legacy giving, which could sustain us long term. But all of these are things that are going to take a while to get into effect. So that was a very long answer to your question, David. Is it good?
Thank you.
Charles Williams. I have a question here about rental income, 18,000 projected. I'm wondering how that relates to our past levels of rental income and what considerations regarding our insurance, liability insurance, relate to that. And I thought it seemed low, but anyway, perhaps it's a projection that's higher. I don't know. That's what I'm wondering.
So our rental income last year was about $17,000. So $18,000 for this year did not seem aggressive. The board has discussed this some. We could make more from rental income, thus make the building less available to members in some ways and increase our building maintenance costs. On insurance, our insurance carrier has informed us last month that it's dropping us and churches across Louisiana. So we're looking for a new carrier. In May. We haven't been dropped. We still have coverage, but basically dropping us before the next hurricane season. So we do have insurance, but we're going to need a new carrier. Did that address your question?
Andreas Hansen. I don't have a question, but I would like to make a comment. I am very pleased that we are increasing the pay for our staff. So, and this is important to note in difficult times. We don't want to be only known for the church that shows up. We also want to be known for the church that compensates its staff fairly. We also want to be known for the church that compensates its staff fairly. And that's good for now, and we want to be known for that in the future. So I was very pleased to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Joanne Freiling, and this is kind of a sensitive issue. A number of us have been working on stewardship for years, on and off. David was chaired, I chaired a lot of people. Trying to encourage people to pledge. And I don't know what the secret is, that some people just will not. And I had the impression when you join the church, you're asked to support it by coming with your body and support. Is there any kind of a way to ask people who are members, please pledge? And kind of have an expectation that everybody does, even if it's just $10 a year. just to put your name down and say, I support the church?
Let me answer this two ways, Joanne. First, this church, by longtime policy, by congregational vote, has decided, unlike most UU churches elsewhere, that it will provide services and welcome lovingly anyone who comes through the doors and participates, whether or not they pledge financially. That's been the longstanding tradition of this church. And you all, congregations in the past, decided that. Secondly, I would just repeat what I noted earlier, that among people who pledged for 2024, significantly more than was the pattern in the past, increased their pledges by a lot. That followed the pandemic years when some members of this church, to help us through hard times, stepped up in extraordinary ways financially. I'm proud to be a member of a congregation where those of us who can do help when there's a need. And I have no data. One third thought, I have no data for this. And only the slimmest little bit of anecdotal information. I think inflation over the past 2 years has been a lot. And I think it's possible there are members in our community who are fully invested in it in every way, but have been hurt in ways that we can't quite comprehend because we don't walk in their shoes, just what the impact of that has been for them. Anyone else? I'll call the question then. All those in favor of approving the 2024 operating budget as presented to the congregation by the board, would you signify by raising your hand? All those opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. So to close, I want to thank Rob, Nathan, the Finance Committee, the members of the Board of Trustees for their continued dedication and work for the church and for their help with today's meeting, David for serving as our parliamentarian, and all of you for being here today to take part in this important work of our church. Thank you. I declare that we are adjourned.